House 1 Gryffindor. The flame that burns both ways. The hat has not even touched your head, and the table is already watching you. That is the first thing you notice, not the castle, not the enchanted ceiling pouring simulated stars across the great hall, not the ghosts drifting through stone walls with the casual indifference of things that stopped caring about physics centuries ago. You notice the eyes, dozens of them, pointed at you from the Gryffindor table with a particular kind of hunger that you will spend years learning to name. It is not curiosity. It is expectation. They are not wondering who you are. They are already deciding what you should become. The hat settles on your skull and goes quiet for a moment that stretches too long. You feel something move inside your thoughts, not reading them exactly, more like testing the weight of them, pressing gently on the architecture of your fears to see which walls hold and which ones shudder. And then it shouts the word, and the table erupts, and someone is pulling you by the arm toward the bench, and there is pumpkin juice in a goblet, and someone older is saying, "Welcome, welcome. You are one of us now. One of us." You will hear that phrase for 7 years. You will never stop to ask what it costs. Gryffindor is built on a story about courage, and stories about courage are the most dangerous kind because they require constant proof. You cannot simply be brave at Gryffindor. You must demonstrate it, regularly, publicly, in ways that can be witnessed and retold and added to the mythology of the house. Quiet courage, the kind that happens in private, the kind that doesn't make a sound, is almost invisible here. The house runs on spectacle, and spectacle runs on risk, and risk, when it becomes habitual, stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like a personality. You do brave things in your first year. Some of them are genuinely brave. You stand up to a prefect twice your size when he corners a first year in the corridor. You walk into a restricted section of the library at 2 in the morning because the answer to something important is in there, and the rule feels smaller than the question. These feel pure. These feel like you acting from something real and interior and entirely your own. But by the third year, something has shifted. You begin doing brave things because the table expects it. Because the reputation has calcified around you, and the reputation needs feeding. You take risks not because they serve anything meaningful, but because backing down now would require an explanation. And explanations are a kind of weakness that Gryffindor does not have much patience for. The house gave you a story about yourself, and now you are managing the story instead of living your life. There is a girl in your year. She is in Hufflepuff. She sits at the yellow table every morning with the same unhurried calm. She laughs at things without looking around afterward to check if the laugh landed correctly. You watch her sometimes and feel something you cannot name immediately. It takes you 3 years to understand that what you feel when you watch her is the memory of what it was like to do things without an audience inside your own head. Gryffindor taught you to be fearless. What it did not tell you is that fearlessness, practiced long enough without reflection, becomes its own kind of blindness. You stop being afraid of the wrong things. You lose the productive fear, the fear that says wait, think, consider what you might be destroying on your way to being impressive. What the house gave you: identity sharp enough to cut, friends who would follow you into anything, the bone-deep certainty that you matter, that your actions ripple outward, that you are not small. What the house took: the permission to hesitate, the right to be uncertain in public, the soft interior space where doubt lives, which is also where wisdom grows. You did not notice it emptying, because courage was pouring in to fill the same room. The truth Gryffindor never says aloud: the lion on the crest is not a symbol of strength. It is a symbol of appetite. And appetites do not ask what they are consuming. House 2, Hufflepuff. The ground beneath everything. Imagine you were sorted here instead. The table does not erupt. There is warm applause, genuine and unhurried. And someone near the end of the bench shifts to make room and offers you bread before you have even sat down fully. There is no mythology surrounding you. There is no story waiting for you to step into. There is just a seat at a table and people who will, without announcement or ceremony, simply include you. This is the part no one tells you about Hufflepuff, the relief. After years of performing courage, of managing the story, of calculating the gap between who you are and who the house needs you to be, the absence of spectacle feels like setting down a weight you carried so long you forgot it had a name. Hufflepuff does not need you to be anything in particular. It needs you to show up, to do the work, to be present without drama in a world that runs on drama. The common room is underground near the kitchens, and it smells faintly of warm bread and soil. The circular windows look out into the castle gardens where things actually grow, where something is planted and tended and allowed to become itself at its own pace. You sit in that common room one evening in October and realize you have not checked whether anyone was watching you in almost a week. But here is what Hufflepuff teaches you that takes longer to see. There is a particular kind of invisibility that comes with decency. The world, especially the world of systems and hierarchies and institutions like Hogwarts, rewards spectacle. It rewards the loud brave thing, and the brilliant answer, and the cunning maneuver. It does not have a ceremony for the person who stayed, who showed up every day without glory and held the thing together with the patient pressure of someone who simply refused to let it fall apart. Hufflepuff students know this. They have always known this. And they made a quiet peace with it that looks, from the outside, like a lack of ambition, but is actually a different kind of ambition entirely. The ambition to live a life that is genuinely yours, not a performance staged for the approval of people who will forget your name inside a decade. The cost is different here. It is not identity consumed by the institution. It is something subtler. It is the slow accumulation of being underestimated, of watching people from other houses advance into positions of power, not because they are more capable, but because they are louder, more willing to position themselves, more fluent in the language of self-promotion that the world mistakes for merit. You are better than some of them. You know this without arrogance, simply as a fact. And the knowing without the recognition creates its own kind of erosion. Not bitterness exactly. Something quieter and more corrosive than bitterness. A resignation that wraps itself in dignity to avoid being named for what it is. The girl you watched from the Gryffindor table. The one who laughed without checking if the laugh landed. She was always here. She always knew something you are only now beginning to understand. That the ground is not where things end up. The ground is where things begin. What this house gives, a self that belongs to you. Relationships built on presence rather than performance. The profound and underrated comfort of being somewhere you do not have to earn each morning. What this house costs, the armor of ambition. The protection that comes from being seen as formidable. There will be rooms you are not invited into. There will be decisions made without you. And the people who made them will tell themselves it was a question of qualifications, when really it was a question of noise. The truth Hufflepuff carries quietly, never claiming credit for it. Every magnificent thing that stands in this world stands because someone unglamorous kept showing up to hold the foundations. The castle does not remember the names of the people who mixed the mortar. House 3, Ravenclaw, the mind that devours itself. Or, imagine the hat chose this one. The applause at the Ravenclaw table is measured. Appreciative in the way that people are appreciative when they recognize something they respect, but do not yet fully trust. You are being evaluated from the moment you sit down, not maliciously, not competitively exactly, but the way all minds in that house evaluate everything, which is continuously and without much regard for whether the subject finds it comfortable. Ravenclaw is built on the premise that intelligence is the highest virtue, and premises that go unquestioned long enough become theology. The tower is beautiful. The common room sits at the top of a spiral staircase, and the windows look out at more sky than you have ever seen from a single room, and there are books in places where other houses would have decoration. And the conversation is extraordinary. On your first night, someone argues about the metaphysics of transfiguration for 40 minutes, and another person pushes back with a theoretical framework they developed independently over the summer, and you sit there feeling the specific electricity of being around people who find ideas genuinely exciting, and you think, this is where I belong. And for a while it is. The problem with belonging to a house that worships intellect is that intellect, without the counterweight of other values, will eventually turn itself into a weapon. It will be pointed at other people's logic, at other people's feelings, which it will classify as irrational and therefore dismiss, at the world's failure to organize itself according to principles that a sufficiently rigorous mind could have designed better. Ravenclaws do not become cruel in the obvious way. They become precise. And precision, aimed at the wrong things, is cruelty with good grammar. You become very good at being right. This is not the same as becoming wise. There is a particular addiction that develops inside a mind that is constantly rewarded for being the sharpest thing in the room. You begin to need the moment of correction, the pause after you speak where someone else realizes they were wrong and you were right. You begin to structure conversations, without quite meaning to, toward that moment. You ask questions you already know the answers to. You allow people to walk partway down a wrong path before you intervene, because the intervention feels better when the error is more developed. You do not notice any of this for a long time. You are too busy being brilliant. The loneliness arrives slowly, the way cold arrives in a stone building, not as an event, but as an ambient condition that has been true for a while before you name it. The friends you have in Ravenclaw are brilliant and interesting, and you enjoy their company in the way you enjoy a particularly demanding book. But you cannot remember the last time someone sat with you in silence that felt comfortable rather than merely quiet. You cannot remember the last time you said something unfinished, something half-formed and uncertain that you released into the air between you and another person and waited to see what it became. In Ravenclaw, you do not release unfinished things. You wait until the thought is complete, airtight, defensible from all angles. And something is lost in that waiting. The part of thinking that happens between people in the space of honest uncertainty, that part stopped happening. Your mind became a very sophisticated closed system. What Ravenclaw gives, a capacity for analysis that borders on supernatural. The ability to hold complexity without flinching. A relationship with truth that does not bend to comfort or social pressure. What Ravenclaw takes, the tolerance for not knowing, the vulnerability of thinking out loud, the ability to be wrong without experiencing it as a failure of self rather than simply a failure of a specific hypothesis. The truth written above the Ravenclaw common room door, the one you must answer correctly to enter each night. The question is always about wisdom. The door never asks if you are intelligent. Intelligence was assumed from the sorting. What the door keeps asking every single night is something deeper. And every night you answer correctly. Every night you give the right answer. And every night you walk inside without asking yourself whether answering a riddle is the same as understanding what it was asking. House 4, Slytherin. The house that was always yours. But then there is this house. The one that sorted you last time was practice. A hypothesis. A version of a life you might have lived. This is the house where the hat paused and said nothing for a very long time, and you sat in the silence knowing, with a certainty that had no rational basis, that it already knew, that it had known before it touched you, that the pause was not deliberation. The pause was respect. Slytherin. The table does not erupt. The applause is precise and deliberate like every other thing in this house, and the faces watching you are composed and measuring, and some of them are smiling in a way that contains more information than a smile should be able to carry. You walk to the table, and someone makes room not by moving impulsively, but by deciding to move. And there is a difference between those two things that you will spend years understanding. The dungeons are cold and green-lit and beautiful in a way that requires adjustment. It is not the warmth of Hufflepuff or the elevation of Ravenclaw or the red-fired energy of Gryffindor. It is the beauty of things that exist at depth, of pressure and patience and the quality of light that only exists when you have gone far enough down that the surface is just a theory. Slytherin does not lie to you about what it is. That is the thing people outside the house never understand. They think it is a house of lies because its members are capable of deception, but that misunderstands the relationship. Slytherin is more honest about human nature than any other house in the castle. It does not pretend that ambition is not ambition. It does not call selfishness by a more flattering name. It looks at what people actually want, not what they say they want, not what they wish they wanted, but the raw material of desire underneath all the performance. And it says, yes, that. We can work with that. The education here is not about spells. It is about reading rooms, reading people, understanding which levers move which mechanisms, in which individuals, under which circumstances. You learn to watch before you speak. You learn that silence in the right moment is a more powerful statement than any sentence. You learn that the person who frames the question controls the conversation, and the person who controls the conversation rarely needs to raise their voice. These are not evil skills. They are human skills. The discomfort comes from how consciously Slytherin teaches them, because consciousness makes visible what other houses prefer to leave implicit. The point of no return in Slytherin does not arrive with a dramatic choice. It arrives incrementally, through the accumulation of small strategic decisions that each seemed reasonable in isolation. You help a housemate navigate a conflict with a professor, not by confronting the professor directly, which would be costly, but by subtly adjusting the narrative around the conflict until the professor believes the resolution was his own idea. It works perfectly. No one is technically harmed. The outcome is arguably better than direct confrontation would have produced. And yet something moved. Something in you shifted its position slightly, like furniture rearranged in a room you thought you knew. You do it again and again, each time cleaner, more efficient, more invisible. You become extraordinarily good at moving through social systems without friction, and the absence of friction begins to feel like the absence of consequence. And those are not the same thing at all. The Hufflepuff girl. She is still there, still across the Great Hall every morning with her unhurried calm. You eat at the Slytherin table, now, and you watch her, and you understand something you did not understand from the Gryffindor table. It is not that she has opted out of ambition. It is that her ambition has a different shape. She wants something specific and bounded and real. You have ambition with no ceiling and no floor and no walls. And you're only beginning to wonder whether a room with no walls is still a room at all. What Slytherin gives, a map of human systems that no other house teaches with this clarity. The ability to survive in environments that would break a more naive person. A quality of self-knowledge that is uncomfortable and necessary and rare. What Slytherin takes, the luxury of uncalculated action. The ability to want something simply, without strategy. You will have a conversation one day with someone you actually love, and you will catch yourself mid-sentence, constructing the optimal way to express what you feel rather than simply expressing it. And in that moment you will understand what the house cost you. Not your morality, not your soul. Something smaller and more essential. The reflex toward spontaneous honesty that you had when you were 11, and the hat had not yet said the word. The truth Slytherin knows, and will not say in mixed company. Every house in this castle teaches its students to want power. Gryffindor calls it heroism. Ravenclaw calls it knowledge. Hufflepuff calls it belonging. Slytherin just calls it what it is. And the honesty of that naming is why the other houses never forgive it. The fifth place, the space between houses, where no one looks. But here is what none of the houses will tell you. The sorting happened when you were 11 years old. 11. You were sorted by a hat that evaluated the architecture of a child's fears and desires and impulses and assigned you an identity that the institution then spent 7 years reinforcing. The hat did not sort who you would become. It sorted who you were on a Tuesday in September when you were small and frightened and wearing new robes that didn't quite fit. And the system. Because it is a system, and systems require categorization to function, treated that assessment as permanent, as definitive, as the true and final answer to the question of who you are. You carried that house with you. You carried the story it told about you. You carried the values it rewarded and avoided the ones it punished, and slowly, without anything so dramatic as a choice, you became the thing the hat predicted. Not because the hat was magic, because you were put into a container and the container had a shape and human beings, over time, assume the shape of whatever hold them. This is the fifth place, the place between the stories, the place where you can stand and look back at all four houses and see them clearly for what they are, not families, not identities, not truths about human nature. They are pedagogical technologies, ways of organizing a large group of children into manageable categories with legible values and predictable behaviors. They are efficient, they are elegant, and they are as arbitrary as any other taxonomy applied to something as uncontainable as a person. The house changed everything not because it revealed who you were. It changed everything because you let it decide. The girl from Hufflepuff, you understand her now. Not because she found the right house. Because somewhere along the way, she stopped performing her house and started just living. The house became a backdrop rather than a script. She carried it lightly, the way you carry the town you grew up in, with affection and without obligation. You are standing now in the Great Hall. All four tables are in front of you. The enchanted ceiling shows something between weather systems. Not quite storm, not quite clear, the specific atmospheric state of a sky deciding what to become. The sorting ceremony is beginning again, and there is a child walking toward the stool with large eyes and small hands and a particular expression you recognize because you wore it once. Terrified, open, completely available to be written on. You want to stop the ceremony. You want to walk to the front of the hall and tell the child something that no one told you. Whatever the hat says, it is the beginning of a question, not the answer. The answer takes a lifetime, and it keeps changing, and the bravest thing you will ever do is not stand up to a monster or solve an impossible riddle or outlast your competition in the long game of institutional ambition. The bravest thing is to keep asking who you actually are, past the category, past the crest on the robe, past the story the system handed you on a Tuesday in September when you were 11, and did not yet know that the institutions which claim to see us most clearly are also the ones with the most to gain from us never seeing ourselves any other way. The hat is placed on the child's head. The Great Hall holds its breath, and somewhere in the pause, before the word is spoken, there is still a moment of pure and unassigned possibility. That moment is the only one that ever really belonged to them, whether they know it or not.